Welcome to World on Wheels. Today, we're going to talk about Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton once again. The Maranello team was living the dream season, or at least it seemed that way until they put the SF25 on the track. And if you enjoy the videos here on the channel, don't forget to subscribe so you can follow everything happening in the world of Formula One with us here on YouTube. The 7-time world champion arrived at Ferrari as a subscribe to our channel, Savior, hoping to lift the most traditional team on the grid out of a 17-year drought. Kimi Räikkönen was responsible for the last driver's title for the Scuderia way back in 2007. But considering the team's performance at the Australian Grand Prix, we can say with absolute certainty that this won't be happening in 2025. Of course, it's still early, and the race was absolute chaos. But precisely in these situations that you expect one of the greatest drivers of all time to make up for any car deficits and do the unexpected. And that's not what happened. Lewis was stuck behind Alex Albon for almost half the race, and it's not as if the Williams driver had a faster car or even one close to Ferrari's performance. At the restart after the first safety car on lap 8, Leclerc was in 5th place, followed by Tsunoda, Albon, and Hamilton. By the time the safety car came out again on lap 34, Leclerc had built a 22-second gap to Albon, an average of more than 0.8 s per lap. Yet, Hamilton still couldn't make the overtake. The Maranello team left Australia heading for China with alarm bells ringing, just 5 points in the Constructors' Championship. Like and share. It's their worst start since 2009 when Räikkönen finished 15th and Felipe Massa didn't complete the race. Things started going off the rails on Saturday in Australia. Even with a Red Bull and a Mercedes out of Q3, Leclerc and Hamilton couldn't manage anything better than the 4th row of the grid. There was a lot of talk that the SF25's lack of pace was due to a wet weather setup, but that wasn't confirmed during the race. Or if it was the case, it clearly didn't work out. What was all love at the start of the season has already turned into a sea of complaints, both on and off the track. Hamilton's communication with his race engineer, Riccardo Adami, who previously worked with Vettel and Sainz, didn't seem ideal, and at one point in the race, the driver seemed visibly frustrated. Subscribe to our channel. He even reported a gear sync issue before abruptly responding to further advice from his engineer. Off the track in Melbourne, Hamilton's post-race interview was practically a copy of his statements after the 2024 United States Grand Prix when he was still with Mercedes. It was really tricky. It was much worse than I thought it would be. The car was very, very difficult to drive today for me. I'm grateful I kept it out of the wall, because that's really where it wanted to go most of the time. There's a lot to take from this. Besides that, I'm just acclimatizing to the new power unit in wet conditions, all the different settings it requires, a different way of driving, a different steering wheel configuration. I did the best I could. I even got up to the lead at one point. It was just about getting guidance on how much the rain was coming. That's what was missing. Hamilton has spent a good amount of time with Ferrari since January, when he was officially introduced to the team. They provided some testing in Fiorano in Spain with the 2022 and 2023 cars, along with 3 days of pre-season testing in Bahrain and, of course, time in the simulator. Still, the adaptation seems much tougher than expected. But beyond that, the reality check of the SF25's pace in Australia was a cold shower on almost all simulations. After pre-season testing, Ferrari was tipped as the closest team to McLaren and a contender to fight Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri for the 2025 titles. Norris even said after FP2 in Australia that Ferrari was a team he feared most for qualifying and the race. I know how much fuel and other things Ferrari had in many of the test sessions. You'd be surprised how fast they'll be this weekend. That prediction couldn't have been further from the truth. Ferrari looked lost in strategy, driver-to-box communication, and worst of all, the SF25 proved in the opening race of the 2025 season that it's a slow car. Back on track, when Lando Norris began lap 56, the penultimate of the race, his teammate had just overtaken Pierre Gasly's Alpine to move back into the points in 10th place, with a little over 3 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton and 3.8 behind Charles Leclerc. The Ferrari duo had intermediate tires with 7 laps on them at that point, 3 laps fresher than Piastri's intermediates on the McLaren. At the time, it seemed that 9th place was secure for Hamilton. But that wasn't the case. Piastri not only closed the gap in under 2 laps, but also overtook Hamilton around the outside at turn 9, and even crossed the finish line 2 seconds ahead of the Brit. just 6 tenths behind Leclerc, who was desperately trying to catch Hülkenberg's Alba. And to make matters worse, Lewis also had to watch George Russell, his former teammate, on the podium, while rookie Andrea Kimi Antonelli, his replacement, finished an astonishing fourth after having a 5-second penalty overturned. Antonelli started 16th, spun during the race, but recovered with brilliant overtakes and showed real racer maturity in the tricky conditions of Melbourne. For Ferrari, it was a horror show in the first race of the year. The Maranello team now has to pick up the pieces and prove that Melbourne was just an outlier. Their first chance to do so comes in China, with a race happening in the early hours of next weekend. But for now, the impression is that Ferrari is heading into the season as the fourth best team. And what about you, motorsport fans? What do you expect from Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton in the 2025 season? Let us know in the comments, and we'll be following everything closely for you. Come with us. Join World on Wheels. Welcome to World on Wheels. Subscribe to this channel to help it grow even faster. We're going to talk about racing. Let's start by discussing those who finish at the back and work our way up to those who finish at the top. First, I want to start with a disclaimer that I think is very important. It's not because Bortoleto retired that I'm going to say this. Regardless of whether he had scored points in this race, I would have said the same thing I've been saying before. This race doesn't mean much for judging the rookies. Melbourne, under these conditions, is something that requires experience. It's not an easy race. It's a tough one. Some drivers might have been dealing with jet lag, and the track characteristics are nothing like the usual tracks on the calendar. It's a street circuit, so it's not worth wasting energy judging the rookies because it's very possible that those who didn't perform well here might do better in the next races. Got it? Let me open the standings here, and you can follow along with me. Let's start from the bottom. Isaac Hadar. Man, I was going to say that Hadar retired on the first lap, but he didn't even make it that far. He retired on the formation lap. Again, it's a horrible track condition, very difficult, with many unpredictable points. Those who watch the Formula 3 and Formula 2 races know that the track was unpredictable. With any tire, at any point, you could end up flying off. It happened to others too. People are being harsh on Hadar because he's not a driver who's confirmed for Formula 1. Many people, including me, think he should do another season in Formula 2 to gain more experience. It gives the impression that he's not ready for Formula 1, and a weekend like this hurts. So, don't be too harsh on him right away. He's not a bad driver, but he has a weight of being promoted early and having to prove himself, especially with Yuki Tsunoda as his teammate, who performed really well. People were also harsh on me because of the tier list I made of the drivers, but you have to understand that the tier list was based on the 2024 results. It's like if I told you in 2020 or 2022 that the McLaren, which was running in P18, would be world champions in 2024. How would you react to that news? Things are dynamic. I'll mention this again later when I talk about some drivers who improved a lot based on the 2024 results, and some who got worse. That tier list still holds in my opinion, and we can do another one for 2025 later. There's not much more to say about Isaac Hadar. Unfortunately, he retired before the first lap. The next races in China and Japan are also not great tracks to prove yourself. It's a very tough start to the championship, but I hope Hadar improves. You could see he was really upset, and even Hamilton's father went to console him. Of course, we joke about drivers, but we don't want anyone to be destroyed personally. I joke about Oliver Bearman, but he was really down, and we feel for him too. It was a very small result compared to what we expected from Bearman. Anyway, we'll talk about him later. 19th, Jack Doohan. He retired on the first lap after crash. The track was unpredictable and very dangerous. This is to show you that even experienced drivers were caught off guard. Those who lasted longer in the race deserve credit because it was like a demolition derby. There's not much to say about Doohan except that the pressure is on. I think everyone will disregard this debut. But if we look at Briatore, it's like the little aliens in * Lethal Company * closing in. 3 days left, 2 days left, 1 day left. 18th, Carlos Sainz Jr. This was sad. During the safety car, Sainz parked in a strange way. He later said on the radio that he had some excessive torque, which could be an issue with the power unit. It might have been from the electric motor or the combustion engine. We don't know. Unfortunately, We'll have to wait to see a better debut from Sainz. 17th, Fernando Alonso. It wasn't a great weekend for Aston Martin. They had a tough preseason, and Alonso was another victim of the unpredictable track. He had a small steering input on the curb, which caused him to lose control. It's a condition where you can't expect anything other than the dry line. The dry line is your safety, and everything else is a danger. Alonso mentioned bad luck in the interviews, saying the accident happened out of nowhere. There's not much to criticize Alonso for. Anyone could have had that happen to them. 16th, Gabriel Bortoleto. Our Brazilian driver retired on lap 47 along with Liam Lawson. Bortoleto was one of the victims of the chaos that happened around lap 41 when Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris went off. Verstappen took the lead, and then it started raining again. It was complete chaos. Even those on intermediate suffered a bit from the changing conditions. In Bortoleto's case, it wasn't because he's Brazilian that I'm defending him, but it was a strange crash. Credit to him for getting the car out of the wall, but the rear right suspension collapsed in a very strange way. Sauber had mentioned earlier that he had brake issues, but they thought they had fixed them. It wasn't fully explained, but it seemed like a random crash. Bortoleto learned a lot in this race. He was running consistently, but experience matters. You can't expect him to perform like someone with 15 years of Formula One experience. So, don't be too harsh on him. He made it to Q2 in qualifying and stayed alive during the race, which is an achievement in itself. Let's wait and see how he evolves. Liam Lawson. If drivers were food, Red Bull would be starving. Lawson's situation is tough. Unlike other rookies, he's not exactly a rookie. Combining 2023 and 2024, he has almost a full season of Formula One under his belt. In 2023 and 2024, he performed well, sometimes even matching Tsunoda in qualifying and race pace. But in 2024, he's a driver who, in my opinion, has more potential than Tsunoda, but is not performing as well. The Red Bull second car curse is real. Every year, whoever is in that second car underperforms. Some people said Lawson's setup wasn't right, and the lack of time in free practice hurt his adaptation. But the fact is, he's not a rookie. He should have performed better. He should have capitalized on the chaos around lap 41 when he was in 7th, but he didn't. On lap 47, he made the same mistake as Hadar. Hadar has much less experience and, in my opinion, is a lesser driver than Lawson. Many drivers succumbed to the pressure this weekend, and we can't draw too many conclusions, especially about the rookies. But Lawson has the weight of having races under his belt, and more was expected of him. He'll have to prove himself in the next races, which are also tough tracks like China and Japan. It's a very difficult start to the season for these guys. 14th, Oliver Bearman. In general, it was a disaster of a weekend for Haas. I don't even remember which safety car it was, but Haas decided to stay on intermediates when everyone else switched to slicks. They probably thought the rain would come back, but everyone had the information about when the rain would arrive. Haas ended up a lap down, and Bearman finished a minute behind. It was a broken strategy from Haas, and Bearman didn't perform well either. He didn't crash, but counting the free practices, it was a nervous and amateur performance from Bearman. We expected much more from him in 2024. He didn't perform badly in the opportunities he had, like in Interlagos, but in Azerbaijan and Saudi Arabia, we saw a different level of driver. We expected more from Bearman, and it's already costing Haas. Haas doesn't look like they'll perform well because Ocon also couldn't extract much from the car. Ocon complained a lot during the race. The Haas duo finished 13th and 14th, the last of the finishers. It wasn't a good weekend for Haas. 12th, Yuki Tsunoda. What bad luck for Tsunoda. I felt really bad for him. He was having a spectacular race, potentially finishing P6 or even P5 because he passed Leclerc at one point. It was an amazing race from Tsunoda. Since the end of 2024, he's been showing improvement. I mentioned this in the tier list, and people were harsh on me because I said he wasn't all that. I don't hate Tsunoda. The issue here is mentality. If he continues to deliver good results and has a strong mentality, he's a top driver. But if he only performs well and has a weak mentality, it's worth nothing, especially in the Red Bull environment, which crushes mentalities. Lawson, who has a strong mentality for this environment, suffered this weekend. So, don't put Tsunoda on a pedestal. This is an analysis that has to be made over the season with the results of this year. Unfortunately, Tsunoda finished 12th, suffering from all the chaos between laps 41 and 47. That safety car was really unlucky. 11th, Pierre Gasly. He was having a good race too, and those who survived the chaos were mostly the more experienced drivers from the top teams, except for Zauber, where Jules' crash was somewhat random. Gasly almost scored points, but was caught by the two Ferraris and Oscar Piastri, finishing 11th. It was a consistent race from Gasly, and I think he has the potential to be in the points regularly. Alpine showed they have a car capable of that too. It wasn't a bad performance from Gasly overall. 10th, Lewis Hamilton. It's hard to judge his race. It wasn't a great race for Ferrari, but it was fair. Hamilton still lacks race pace and qualifying pace compared to Leclerc. Leclerc has more familiarity with the car and the team. You can hear in the radios that Hamilton sometimes lacks the intimacy he had with Mercedes' strategy. He says it's comfortable, but it's different. Ferrari even had a great radio moment with Leclerc, where he said there was probably a leak in his cockpit, maybe from the drink system, and the engineer replied, "Maybe it's water." That says a lot about Ferrari's communication. Hamilton will struggle a bit at the start of the year, but 10th place is a bit bitter for Ferrari debut. Again, with such adverse conditions, let's wait for a more Formula One-like track and better conditions to judge. 9th, Oscar Piastri. I felt bad for Piastri. He clearly didn't have the pace to fight Norris, but he was there. In the chaos when it started raining and everyone was on slicks, he went off the track. Unlike Norris, he couldn't recover the car and ended up stuck in the grass. It was spectacular that he managed to get out of that situation. He made some great recoveries, passing Gasly and Hamilton in a very brave move, one of the best overtakes of the year for sure. He finished 9th, which is sad for the Australian fans who never had an Australian on the podium. It wasn't a bad race from Piastri. He secured some points. 8th, Charles Leclerc. It was a bitter race for Ferrari. They stayed out one lap too long, probably to avoid traffic in the pits and an unsafe release, which happened to some others. It wasn't a total mistake from Ferrari, but it was a bad situation. A bitter debut for Leclerc. 7th, Nico Hülkenberg. He gave a masterclass today. He taught a lesson to those who criticize him for taking Bottas' time in qualifying. In the race, calmness and experience matter. Hülkenberg gave a lesson in stability. Zauber managed the race very well, and Hülkenberg knew how to handle the tires. A phenomenal result for Hülkenberg, 6 points. It's also good for Bortoleto because his team did well. 6. Lance Stroll. Good result, but we have to agree that it was mostly luck. Stroll capitalized well on the chaos. He had a quiet race, but he didn't make mistakes. Stroll may not have the potential people expect given the investment in him, but he's an experienced driver. He's been in Formula One since 2017, so he's dealt with these situations before. We have to remember Stroll's value as a driver who can bring points. He may not shine, but he can score points. That's what he did today, securing 8 points for Aston Martin. That's what we expect from him. 5th, Alex Albon, another driver people criticize me for calling average. You have to remember that at this point in the championship, I analyze Albon based on his 2024 performance, where he was scared and diminished compared to Franco Colapinto, who sometimes outperformed him. The parameter we had for Albon in 2022 and 2023 was of a good driver, but in 2024, he seemed average. Maybe he wasn't as good as we thought, and his teammates were just really bad. Now, in 2025, in the first opportunity, he's performing really well. Williams seems to have a good car this year. Finally, after 17 years, they have a car that can compete in the midfield. Credit to Albon and Williams. They've been performing really well. I hope they continue to develop the car. I have a lot of faith in James Vowles. 4th, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. This kid drove really well. As the race went on, he got more comfortable with the tires and the dry line. He developed a championship-level recovery drive, going from 15th or 16th to 4th. He capitalized on many mistakes, which is expected, but the way he did it was heroic. I've always said that if Mercedes put an 18-year-old in the car, they know what they are doing. 3rd, George Russell. It was a quiet race for Russell. He passed unnoticed, but he was consistent, picking up positions here and there. 3rd place is a good result for Russell, but I think is more about bringing results home, even if not in the most spectacular way. Good weekend for Russell and Mercedes. Second, Max Verstappen. Verstappen is a beast. Australian Grand Prix. He drives incredibly held at Melbourne's Albert. For those who say his titles were easy and he only won because of the car, marked a please. In the last 2 laps chasing Norris, with his battery turning into milk, Norris had to push to keep him behind. Multiple incidents. Verstappen was catching performances. He drives incredibly well. But Red Bull isn't in great shape. Verstappen complained a lot about the car's balance, saying it was understeering and oversteering. There's work to be done in the Red Bull garage, where drivers familiarize themselves with Lando Norris. There's a lot of talk about Norris being a choker, a driver who doesn't have what it takes to be a champion. In 2024, he was thrown into a championship fight against Verstappen, who was already a 3-time champion and became a 4-time champion at Norris' expense. But it was Norris' first year with a car capable of fighting for the championship. It's not like he had several years of experience fighting for titles. I don't judge Norris for his mistakes in 2024 because it was his first year with competitive participation in this his improving and becoming a more complete driver. I think he has less potential than Piastri in the long term, but is a more complete driver right now. Norris dominated the race, even when he made a mistake and went off the track. Piastri also went off, but Norris managed the situation intelligently, pitting to the right tires. There were moments of emotional intelligence in this race, especially with Verstappen on his tail in the last 2 laps. In 2024, I would have feared for Norris, but is becoming a more secure driver. We might see a spectacular Norris in 2025. That's it. Guys, much to the delight we talked a bit about each driver's race. Defending champion this is a simpler video format, meant for us to chat and get the video out quickly. If you stayed until the end, I'm really happy you were here. Consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like to help me out, and leaving a comment to boost engagement. If you want to support this project, consider becoming a member. Let me know your thoughts on the race or any interesting points in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers! The 2025 Australian Grand Prix, held at Melbourne's Albert Park circuit on March 16, 2025, marked a thrilling and unpredictable start to the Formula One season. The race was characterized by challenging weather conditions, multiple incidents, and standout performances that set the tone for an exciting championship ahead. Anticipation was high as teams and drivers arrived in Melbourne. The weekend schedule began with free practice sessions on March 14th, where drivers familiarized themselves with a 5.278 street circuit. Lando Norris and McLaren showcased early dominance by topping the first practice session, followed closely by Carlos Sainz Jr. Williams and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc. The session faced interruptions, notably when rookie Oliver Bearman of Haas spun into the wall, causing significant damage to his car. The second practice session saw Ferrari's Charles Leclerc leading the timesheets, with McLaren's Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris in pursuit. Bearman's earlier crash prevented his participation in this session, as his car required extensive repairs. In the final practice session on March 15th, Oscar Piastri led the field, with Mercedes' George Russell and Red Bull's Max Verstappen trailing. Bearman's misfortunes continued as he spun into the gravel at turn 11, bringing out a red flag and leaving him without a timed lap. Qualifying sessions are always pivotal, and this year's Australian Grand Prix was no exception. Lando Norris secured pole position with a blistering lap of 1 minute and 15.096 seconds, setting himself up favorably for the race. The front row was completed by McLaren's Oscar Piastri, much to the delight of the Australian fans. Defending champion Max Verstappen qualified third, with Mercedes' George Russell securing fourth. Race day brought unforeseen challenges as light rain descended upon Albert Park, adding a layer of complexity to the season opener. The race, initially scheduled for 58 laps, was reduced to 57 due to an aborted start procedure. The formation lap witnessed drama when Racing Bull's debutant Isaac Hadjar crashed, leading to a delayed start and his subsequent absence from the race. The treacherous conditions became evident immediately. On the opening lap, Alpine's rookie Jack Doohan lost control, crashing out and bringing an early end to his home Grand Prix. Williams' Carlos Sainz Jr. also faced misfortune, retiring after a collision that underscored the challenges posed by the wet track. These incidents prompted the deployment of the safety car, a recurring theme throughout the race. The wet conditions caught several drivers off guard, leading to multiple crashes and retirements. Notably, Aston Martin Fernando Alonso and Sauber's Gabriel Bortoleto were among those who couldn't complete the race due to accidents. As the race progressed, strategic decisions became crucial. McLaren's Lando Norris maintained his lead, showcasing skill and composure amidst the chaos unfolding behind him. Max Verstappen, known for his aggressive driving style, kept pressure on Norris but faced challenges due to tire wear and the tricky conditions. Mercedes' George Russell capitalized on the situation, driving a steady race that eventually earned him a spot on the podium. His teammate, rookie Andrea Kimi Antonelli, impressed many by finishing fourth in his debut race, demonstrating the depth of talent in the Mercedes camp. The Australian Grand Prix held special significance for local drivers. Oscar Piastri, starting from the front row, had high hopes but faced heartbreak when he slid off the track on lap 44, dropping to the back of the field. He managed a commendable recovery, finishing ninth and securing valuable points. Jack Doohan's early exit was a disappointment for the home crowd. Despite showing promise in qualifying, his race ended prematurely, highlighting the unforgiving nature of Formula One, especially under challenging conditions. Lewis Hamilton's much-anticipated debut with Ferrari was met with challenges. The seven-time world champion struggled with the car's performance in the wet, finishing 10th and expressing dissatisfaction with the setup. This result indicated that Ferrari might need to address performance issues to compete at the front. Despite the numerous challenges, Lando Norris showcased exceptional skill and resilience, leading from start to finish and securing his fifth career victory. His performance not only demonstrated his growth as a driver, but also underscored McLaren's resurgence as a formidable force in the championship. Max Verstappen's second-place finish was hard-fought, as he battled both the conditions and his competitors. George Russell's consistent drive to third highlighted Mercedes' potential this season. Following the Australian Grand Prix, the Drivers' Championship standings are as follows. 1. Lando Norris, McLaren, 25 points. 2. Max Verstappen, Red Bull Racing, 18 points. 3. George Russell, Mercedes, 15 points. 4. Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Mercedes, 12 points. 5. Charles Leclerc, Ferrari, 10 points. The 2025 Australian Grand Prix was a race that tested not only the technical capabilities of the cars, but also the adaptability and skill of the drivers. From a racing expert perspective, this Grand Prix highlighted key trends that will likely shape the rest of the season. McLaren's resurgence, Verstappen's relentless consistency, and the growing competitiveness of Mercedes. McLaren's breakthrough performance. Lando Norris' dominant victory is perhaps the most significant takeaway from this race. His ability to manage the tricky conditions while maintaining control at the front speaks volumes about both his growth as a driver and McLaren's significant improvements. The team has clearly made strides in aerodynamics and mechanical grip, allowing Norris to extract the maximum from the car in wet and dry conditions. However, Oscar Piastri's unfortunate drop down the order after his off-track excursion on lap 44 suggests that McLaren still has some learning to do in race execution, particularly under changing conditions. Red Bull's vulnerability? Max Verstappen remains as formidable as ever, but this race showed that Red Bull is not invincible. While he managed a strong second-place finish, the fact that he couldn't mount a real challenge for the win is telling. Red Bull's usual dominance and tire management wasn't as evident here, suggesting that their setup may not have been optimized for the unique demands of Albert Park in wet conditions. While it's too early to suggest that Red Bull is in trouble, this race may indicate that McLaren and Mercedes are closing the gap. Mercedes' consistency and Antonelli's strong debut. George Russell's third-place finish underlined Mercedes' steady progress. While they may not yet have the outright pace of challenge for wins in normal conditions, they have a solid car capable of competing at the front. The real revelation, however, was Andrea Kimi Antonelli, who finished fourth in his debut race. His calm and composed performance despite challenging conditions suggests that Mercedes is a future star in the making. If the car continues to improve, Antonelli could soon become a serious contender in the title fight. Ferrari's disappointing start. Lewis Hamilton's first race with Ferrari did not go as planned. Struggling in wet conditions, he could only manage a 10th-place finish, far from the expectations set by pre-season testing. This suggests that Ferrari still has work to do in optimizing their car's balance and tire performance in variable conditions. Charles Leclerc's 5th-place finish was more respectable, but the team must improve if they want to consistently challenge for podiums and wins. Conclusion: a season of close battles ahead. This Grand Prix gave us a taste of what could be one of the most competitive F1 seasons in recent history. McLaren has emerged as a serious challenger, Mercedes is making steady gains, and Ferrari still has work to do. While Red Bull remains a powerhouse, they are no longer untouchable. If Norris' performance is anything to go by, we may be witnessing a shift in the competitive order, setting up an unpredictable and thrilling season ahead.